At the same time many of these changes are happening in Europe, we're also seeing the first European contacts with the New World. These contacts with the New World brought immediate and noticeable changes to European society with the introduction of new foods, including things that we consider staples like tomatoes, coming to Europe. But there was a lack of understanding between indigenous cultures in the Americas and the Europeans who often had the first contact with them. Those contacts were often violent, and the Europeans often came with either colonial impulses, hoping to claim and settle territory in a way that was not taking into account the people that were already there, or in some cases they just came to steal. They wanted the things that would make them rich in European society, most notably gold and silver. And one of the places we see these clashes most acutely is with the Aztec people. The Aztec capital Tenochtitlan was located more or less in modern-day Mexico City, and was one of the largest cities in North America at the time of European contact in the early 1500s. The city was on a lake with several long causeways stretching to the shore, making it incredibly defensible. In fact, when the Aztecs were conquered, the Spanish actually bluffed their way into the city and attacked from the inside, knowing that it would be too difficult for them to conquer the Aztecs from the outside. And even Europeans were impressed by this city. One Spanish writer who visited Tenochtitlan calls it the Venice of the West, and talks about how the Aztec used these canals to transport goods and people around the city and as a source of fresh drinking water, just like we see in European cities like Venice. The religious beliefs of the Aztec people were based on the idea of reciprocity, that you had certain responsibilities in life, and in exchange you received certain benefits. We think about Mesoamerican society being broken into roughly 3 groups. At the lowest end are the peasants, and if you're a peasant, your job is to raise crops and to be infantry in the army. And in exchange, the nobility and the priests will intervene with the gods and make sure the natural world continues to operate as it should. If you are a priest or a noble, you're in the middle rung of the ladder, and you are thought to be especially good at communicating with the gods. This means that you are required to carry out religious rituals, including sacrifices, some of which could be very painful or very brutal, including human sacrifice. And in exchange, your life was pretty comfortable. You lived a life of luxury with luxurious goods, clothing, and food. At the top of the ladder in Mesoamerican society are the gods, and the gods receive the worship and sacrifices of human beings, and in exchange they look after the natural world. The image we're seeing on the slide here shows a reconstruction of one of the largest temples in Tenochtitlan. And this is the Great Temple, or the Templo Mayor in Spanish. And on the top of this pyramid were located 2 temples. On the left-hand side is a temple with a blue decoration, and on the right-hand side is a temple with red decoration. The blue temple is dedicated to the god Tlaloc, who is the god of rain, and the red temple is dedicated to the god Huitzilopochtli, who's the god of warfare, fire, and hunting. And these 2 temples were aligned very precisely. During the hot summer months, the sun would rise behind the red temple, and during the colder, rainier winter months, the sun would rise behind the blue temple. For a few days around each equinox, the sun would rise precisely in the gap between these 2 temples, symbolizing the balance of the season. Ultimately, very little remains of this site today. We can see in the bottom of this image the very basic foundational remains of this site. But this place was discovered with the piece that's on the far right of the slide. This shows the Aztec goddess Coilxauhqui, who's the goddess of the moon. And if we look closely at this image, we can see that she's been sacrificed. Her head has been cut off, but also her arms and legs have been removed from her torso. And this image references the importance of sacrifice to the Aztec people and the importance of sacrifice to keep the universe operating as it should. But it also represents the dominance of the sun over the moon. And this was the first object to be discovered at this site. And it was discovered by utility workers who were digging trenches for underground utility lines. And this confirmed the location of Tenochtitlan to modern architects. Like a lot of archaeological sites in populous modern areas, Mexico City is a very large city center, and we can't just dig up parts of it because there might be archaeological discoveries underneath. However, as we might guess even just from this short overview, this way of thinking was quite different than the European way of thinking, and it often exacerbated, rather than smoothed over, some of those inherent conflicts between indigenous Americans and European colonizers.